Man, so I'll start this up. Hello, everybody. This is Conversations with Rob. Please like, subscribe, and also listen to us on radio. I have a special guest that I've been fond of listening to this guy for quite a while now, at least since 2016, 2017. And I found out about him on the Jimmy Dore Show, but he has his own program. We're going to talk about that in a second. Ron Placone. He's a man of many talents. He plays the guitar. He's even got some songs out. I just found that out on Pandora and also on other platforms. He's also a comedian, singer, songwriter, guitar player, and he also has his own show, as we said, Getting Your News On with Ron, Monday through Thursday. So, Ron, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rob. I appreciate that. And yeah, I'm not much of a singer-songwriter, but on my comedy album, there is a song or two that I put on there for fun. But I have a lot of friends who are professional musicians, so I always have to point out I'm just a hobbyist compared to them, but I have fun with it.
And by the way, if you guys can see in the video, if you're listening on video, we can see Lucy somewhat in the screen. She's a legend on Ron's show.
She's the co-host, and you know she has a web comic out now that she's quite fond of. You can go to lucyandron.com to read the web comics between myself and my cat Lucy.
And also, Ron, happy early birthday. Your birthday's on the 5th coming up of December, so happy early birthday to you.
Thank you. I'm turning 27 again. I'm excited.
Oh, I thought it was 19, but okay, we'll move forward with that. All right. So first off, we want to get into our comedy segment. How did you first know you wanted to be involved in in comedy?
So I always wanted to do radio, which is kind of funny because it's come full circle in a lot of ways. But when I was in college, I was really into music my entire life. Like I played in bands in high school and stuff. And then when I was in college, I kind of got involved with radio, and eventually I got involved with non-commercial radio. This is around the same time as the election in 2004 and the Iraq War, which got me really involved in politics. I didn't know why we were in Iraq at the time. I wasn't really paying attention prior to, going to college. I was just a kid in high school, and I was just concerned about punk rock and skateboarding and getting girls to like me, right? Like you do when you're a teenager. And then, I didn't know why we were going into Iraq. It didn't make any sense to me. A lot of my friends that just signed up for ROTC to help pay for college were sent overseas, and I didn't know if I'd ever see them again. And I thought, why is this happening? This doesn't make any sense. Iraq did not attack the United States on 9/11. This was what was going through my head as an 18-year-old. And I discovered a documentary called Out Fox, and I discovered a writer named Noam Chomsky. And that sort of like blew the lid off for me. And I started really paying attention to news and politics. And I decided we really need to stop George Bush, which we did. And unfortunately, we failed to do so. Which no offense, Florida, but you didn't help there either time. But yeah. I mean, so I started paying a lot of attention to politics. I got involved with non-commercial radio, started watching Democracy Now! On the regular. And I decided I wanted to do radio. But, I wanted to do kind of like something satirical and whatnot. So I eventually tried stand-up comedy because I was doing this sort of, what's up, Lucy? Lucy, she's been very clingy. I just got back to the country from Australia. So she's been very clingy. For everyone who's just listening to this audio, Lucy just kind of pawed my face to remind me that she's here, which she does from time to time. And it looks like we're high-fiving. It's great. But yeah, so I tried stand-up one night because I was doing another thing that was going on simultaneously is I was doing this sort of anti-folk thing where it was just me and an acoustic guitar. But the songs were all like kind of satirical and political. And I would measure the success of a show based on how many laughs I got, which is also how a comedian gauges the success of a show. So sort of naturally, I tried stand-up. And I was really bad at it first. I didn't know what I was doing at all. But I knew I really liked it. And I knew it was just a crazy rush being up there with nothing except for my own words. I had done theater and I had done music, but I didn't have a script in front of me. I didn't have a guitar strapped to me. I didn't have a song to sing or lines that I had previously memorized. It was just me up there alone with whatever jokes I was working on. And that was a rush. So I tried stand up. I fell in love with it. And when I moved out to Seattle after college, which I moved out there because I was just, trying to figure myself out, wanted to go somewhere and, kind of start my life or whatever. I got really involved in the comedy scene there, and I started going up, 3-4 nights a week. And then that became almost every night, just going to open mics, trying to figure out what stand up was all about. And I got bit by the bug, and that sort of led to everything else.
So you kind of just led into this. How has comedy changed since you started, doing open mics?
Well, I don't know if it's changed all that much, really. I mean, the scenes now, it's gotten a lot bigger. Like when I was, like, I'll give you a for instance. So I started in Seattle, which was a big comedy scene, still is, and you could kind of get up every night of the week, even if you were just, what we call an open micer, which means you're a beginner, you're just going to open mic, signing up, trying to figure out how to make material, et cetera, et cetera. And I could get up every night of the week if I wanted to, and I would get up almost every night. When I moved back to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is where I'm from originally, I moved back there to go to grad school. There were only a handful of comedy events per week there, and I was not used to that. So I would go to like music open mics and stuff like that, where there were like folk singers and stuff, to get what I thought, what I valued as enough stage time. I was used to getting up almost every night. In Pittsburgh, that was really hard to do at that time. Now, that's not the case anymore. Now, in a city like Pittsburgh, you can get up pretty much every night of the week. So that's something, it used to be only like the really big kind of, I don't know what the best way to put it is, but kind of like cultural hub cities, like a place like an Orlando or a Seattle or a Boston or a San Francisco or, obviously New York or LA. There was a ton going on every night of the week. And then in more mid-sized cities like an Indianapolis or a Pittsburgh or a Baltimore or whatever, there wasn't as much going on. Now, pretty much every major city, you can get up pretty much every night. Like the comedy scenes are just really big now and really popular. So I guess that's maybe the biggest thing I've noticed. It's a lot easier to get started, which I think is a good thing.
Right. Well, I guess the reason why I asked that is because we see a lot of political correctness now. Obviously, the Me Too movement. If you look at comedians in the past, I mean, look at Red Skelton, even Eddie Murphy, all these other guys that have done comedy. If they went up on stage now and said some of the jokes and stuff they said, even Richard Pryor, those guys went up there and said stuff now, they'd get, kicked off the stage. If they had any endorsements, they'd be screwed. That's what I guess I was getting to. Do you see a lot of that now when you go up on, you're worried about kind of political correctness? I know, your show and kind of people that are going to your show know what they're going to get in general. But do you worry about that or being like more durable with jokes and comments during the show?
Me personally, no. I mean, it's one of those things, like everything has a dialectic, right? And now with the internet, you have, everybody can just kind of let their opinion known. And of course there's that segment where they're just looking for something to be outraged about. And, if I never tweeted anything because I was worried someone might take it a certain way, I would never tweet anything. Like I would, and I mean, I could give you plenty of for instances where it's like, this offended you? Really? You took this that certain way? Wow. Okay. But that being said, I think in a lot of ways, I think Mark Maron kind of summed it up recently where he's like, really the only thing is you can't just kind of target marginalized groups anymore the way you used to be able to. And, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. And I think there's still a lot of great comedy being made. I performed at a lot of colleges over the years. I didn't notice there was some absurd political correctness going on. I think there's a greater social awareness, but that's always happened with the times. And as far as like concepts like punching down and stuff like that, George Carlin was talking about that stuff in the 90s. You know, people love to point to George Carlin like, oh, he was a free speech crusader, which absolutely he was. But he also knew which battles were worth having and which ones were just, being a bully. He knew the difference. You can find the CNN clip of him talking about that. Same with Bill Hicks. So, I think that in the blogosphere world we live in now, of course, there's kind of more of an outrage culture and a cancel culture, and of course there's places there's for instances where they take it to an ugly place where it just becomes kind of a lynch mob, and it's not really all that constructive. But I think overall, social enlightenment is overall a good thing, and I don't feel like I'm being shackled or anything like that. So I don't, I think that is an issue, but I don't share, I guess, the overall perspective on it.
All right. So 2 more questions on comedy. Then I kind of want to move in stuff that I've heard, by listening to you that you're passionate about.
Sure.
As far as, meeting Jimmy, working with Steph, Graham, and the rest of the people that are on the show, how did you guys meet? Was it at an open mic, or did you have friends in common? How did that work out?
No, so I like telling this story, and I think Jimmy likes it too. But I watched Jimmy's special when I was a freshman in college. When I was in college, I watched Jimmy's first special because that was when it came out, and so I knew who he was. And I met him years later at the Young Turks studio. We were both doing a show called On Point, which is no longer in existence. But we were both doing that show. And I came across the Young Turks when I opened up for Lee Camp in Pittsburgh, actually. And this was back in 2013. So I met Jimmy when I was just in LA for the first time. And we just sort of kept in touch via email, whatever, and really starting to blow up. So, I would kind of do panel on his show, and then, I kind of kept showing up, and he was doing more and more shows because his show was getting more and more popular. And then I started writing for him, and then I started, becoming a regular on the show, and that's just kind of how it all blossomed into what it is today.
Oh, wow, impressive. So let's move on to the last thing. I know you have a show coming up on December 13th in Ventura, California, your next show on the Progressive Comedy Tour. What should people that are going to the comedy tour, I told you I was interested in going to the one in March 12th in Orlando of next year. Yeah. What should people expect of, when they go with you and Graham to watch the comedy tour?
We have a really great time. We just got back from Australia, which it was our first international leg of this tour, and we hope to do more of those. But, it's it's a stand-up tour. So we each go on stage and we each do 45 minutes apiece. So, you're getting 2 headlining sets from both myself and from Graham. And we talk a lot about what's going on in the world. So it's a place where if you're really following news and politics, you can hear punchlines that you'll be able to relate to a little bit more. And if you're not as into that stuff, it's not like we talk about nothing but politics for 45 minutes. As a comedian, I talk about other things in my life as well. I talk about my relationships. I talk about just kind of general observations. So, you're going to laugh and have a good time. And, people kind of walk away from it feeling a little less alone because you gather with a bunch of people in your city who are a little more like-minded, who are into causes that you might be into. We usually have the DSA show up. We usually have Action for Assange people show up. MMT people show up. Grassroots progressive candidates show up. And we let some organizations table after our shows if they want to do that, as long as it's an organization we're on board with. Veterans for Peace has shown up. Green Party has shown up. Movement for a People's Party shows up a lot. So a lot of progressives that have, different issues and causes that they kind of cling to. Sunrise Movement, and PM Press has tabled at our events. So you kind of walk away from it feeling a little less alone. And there's kind of a communal aspect to it. And we do a meet and greet after. So, it's a lot of fun. And it's kind of not only a fun comedy show, but it's a cool way to meet other kind of progressives in your area. So we have a really great time doing it. And we're going to be hitting the road pretty hard in 2020 because there's an election coming up. Right. So we got to hit the road. So, you can go to ronplacone.com or grahamelwood.com for all those tour dates. We already have Tucson, Arizona confirmed, San Francisco confirmed, Orlando, Florida confirmed, Miami, Florida confirmed. We should be confirming Tampa soon, Seattle, Portland. I'm going to be in Pittsburgh. That's just me, though. That's not me and Graham. But, all tour dates can be found at my website, ronplacone.com, and we're going to be announcing a lot more in the coming weeks.
All right. So, Ron, I'm looking forward to that. Both of you guys, because you guys – really are funny, but you also have a lot to bring to the table as far as experience in politics in general. So let's talk about something that's came up in the past year or so with YouTube political shows, which is, yours, Jimmy's, Graham has a show too. But we're seeing, and I listen to Jordan Sheridan a lot, who I'm a big fan of, and I also interviewed him. We see a lot of people talking about the YouTube suppression. I've listened to Jimmy's show. They've done a lot of demonetizing of his videos. I'm sure you're getting hit with the YouTube suppression too. How do we, go through this and say, with these shows and say, how do we, fix this, I guess? I mean, is there a way to even fix this through YouTube? Should we look at other platforms? There's no real other YouTube. But, right. So it's really hard for guys like you, Jimmy, Jordan Sheridan to do this.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. I mean, it's definitely going on. They YouTube kind of changes their rules every other week. And for some reason, sarcasm slide, for some reason, it always screws over the independent creators. I don't know why that is, but for some reason, it never works in our favor. I think the overall solution for all this stuff, as far as online suppression and stuff like that, is to make a lot of these entities public utilities. And that would require significant policy change and antitrust. And I know Bernie Sanders does have a plan for it. I think that's the best solution. Will we see that anytime soon? Likely no. So in the meantime, it is worthwhile to explore other platforms. It is worthwhile to kind of navigate the waters the best you can. I myself am on Rockfin as well, which is an alternative platform to YouTube. It's a subscription model to YouTube. And you're seeing more stuff like this pop up, which I think is a good thing. I mean, now there's like subscription-based content providers who want to have, content that focuses on, different political leanings and provides, content for people who kind of want that type of thing, something like a Means TV, that's sort of a socialist-run cooperative, and they want to bring in scripted content and stuff like that. I think that's really cool. I think what Rockfin's doing is really cool. I'm glad to be part of it. So, and then this sort of bleeds into another issue that I'm very serious about, and that is making sure we preserve a free and open internet. We don't have net neutrality right now. We lost it with the Trump administration. We've been fighting tooth and nail on the front lines to try to preserve that. If we lose net neutrality completely, which, we're fighting it out in the courts right now, if we lose it completely, there's going to be a slow boil effect where the internet service providers are going to slowly carve up our internet to the point where it looks like cable television. And what I mean by that is you'll just have a bunch of, subscription services by the bigwigs, and you already see that happening, by the way. HBO has a separate thing now. Disney Plus has a certain thing now. That's not just a coincidence. They're preparing for a world where the internet's going to look like cable television 2.0, where independent shows like yours and mine and all the other independent shows people watch online, they won't load. They won't be able to load because we won't be able to pay the fees for our content to load fast enough. So it's going to push people to these corporate outlets, much like what happened with cable television. So, holding the front line for a free and open internet is incredibly essential. I think that the only way to really do that indefinitely is to take the internet out of these cable companies' hands, out of the hands of Comcast, out of the hands of AT&T, out of the hands of Verizon, and put it into the hands of cities. And that's something we can do. That's something some cities have already done. It's called municipal broadband, and that's another thing that I'm very serious about, getting the internet in the hands of your city where net neutrality is written into the charters. And that's something that you can do in your own community, or start to do in your own community. I'm trying to do it in mine. So yeah, to make a long answer longer, that's kind of what we need to do to make sure that that this thing of ours stays a thing.
Well, that's what I was just going to get to next. You kind of answered much of the question, but with net neutrality, which you are passionate about, and I know that you up in D.C. in June with Fight for Our Future, and you did that big full day thing. You went to Mitch McConnell's office and stuff. How did that work out? I mean, I know that the Senate isn't going to do anything. It's in Republican hands. Mitch McConnell's not going to do a damn thing for anybody.
Right.
I mean, and they got a crappy challenger, Amy McGrath. She's a joke. There is a guy that's running now that's more of a progressive now, so we'll see what happens with him. But if you could talk to the viewers, how did that go with the Fight for Our Future when you went up there and protested at Mitch McConnell's office?
Yeah, Fight for the Future is the organization. They do amazing work, and we did a day of action for net neutrality. Mitch McConnell, of course, was not there when we presented the petitions. He stayed in his shell, but we did show up, and everybody was very nice, like they're going to be in the Senate building. Yeah. And the day of action was overall successful, and we kind of knew going into it that the Senate's not going to act on this. It's a Republican-controlled Senate. But what we wanted to do was we wanted to bring net neutrality back into people's minds. We wanted to kind of have it on record that these are the people who are going against this thing. And since that has happened, a lot of the people, in the House and the Senate that are going against net neutrality, especially Democrats, they've really been put on notice. I mean, Kristen Sinema, a lot of these anti-net neutrality Democrats, especially, 'cause that's one of the few things where, even a lot of the establishment Democrats, they at least get net neutrality right most of the time. But some of them, you can't even count on them for that. Well, they've really been put on notice, which is a good thing. Here in California, our bill has moved forward largely because of people keeping net neutrality front and center. There was a lot of pressure on Brown on his way out to sign that bill, which he did. And now there's pressure on Newsom to kind of confirm it, because the court recently ruled that states can make their own net neutrality bills. That still does have overwhelming support in California, so it will move forward. So yeah, I think overall keeping net neutrality front and center is incredibly important and incredibly valuable. There's a net neutrality pledge that a group called Demand Progress has out there for all the presidential candidates. Hopefully that's going to see a big push into the spotlight. And so I think the day of action was a good one, and I hope it becomes an annual thing. Even though our initial, the actual getting Mitch McConnell to act thing, of course that didn't happen, but we kind of knew it wasn't. It was more like a symbolic action, going to his office saying, hey, here's over 3 million signatures of people who are demanding you act on a free and open internet, and you force it to a vote. And even if we lose the vote, we want the names of all the people who went against a free and open internet, Republican and Democrat alike.
So as far as the municipal broadband, you just touched on that, the question before this, with the net neutrality as far as fixing it. You live in Pasadena. You went to the city or the town council meeting where they had a fight for that. How is that going? And also, how can consumers get in the fight about that in their own communities like you did?
So I showed up to a city hall meeting, and I basically made the case for it. I said what municipal broadband is. And, you kind of have to present it a certain way to a city. You have to make them realize, because a lot of city council people, and I include my own city in this, it's not that they're against the idea of municipal broadband necessarily. I mean, some people might be, because they might get some money from the cable industry. But a lot of times at the local level, they just don't really know what it is. And so I showed up to my city council meeting. I made the case for it. I explained it in as quickly as I could. And they put it on a city agenda. So we showed back up when they put it on a city agenda. They conducted a study, which I appreciate them doing. However, the study was very narrow in its scope. They looked at one, for instance, which was Beverly Hills, California, where Beverly Hills is unrolling a fiber to the home project, which is basically, internet to everyone's home via fiber, and it's city owned. They, looked at the cost of what Beverly Hills was doing. They applied that cost to the mileage of Pasadena and just said, hey, this is real expensive. We can't do this. We should just let AT&T and Spectrum look out for us. They have our best interests. So, I was a little disappointed in that conclusion. And I said, look, I appreciate you guys doing this, but you looked at one case study in the entire country. You looked at Beverly Hills, one of the wealthiest cities in the world, really. I mean, maybe, so I don't think that's a very accurate representation of the potential for municipal broadband. There's organizations that come in and do assessments of this stuff. We should have that done. So that's where we're at right now. We're trying to kind of get it back on the city's radar. And by we, I mean, I'm pretty much going at it myself, but, I'm trying to get it back on the city's radar. And in the interim, the other thing I'm trying to do, letting people know how they can get involved. There's a playlist on my YouTube channel committed to municipal broadband and net neutrality that kind of lays out these issues, that lays out what you can do, that has interviews with different people with different institutions like the Institute of Local Self-Reliance, which builds municipal broadband networks all over the country. It lets people know how they can get their community involved with them and how they can get them out to your community to try to build city internet. So, my goal in the coming year is to increase that playlist and to build a more formal structure around this. Like I hope to have representatives in as many cities as possible who are, kind of on the ground floor trying to make this happen in their community. I hope to have more foundational resources available to them, how-to manuals, stuff like that, mini documentaries around this issue that they can show their city council members. So that's already started, and it's already been building. I mean, there's people, Columbia, South Carolina, Coral Springs, Florida. That's a city, right?
Right.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry.
Down South Florida. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to say Coral Gables, but I'm pretty sure it's Coral Springs, but I think it's Coral Gables as well. Louisville, Kentucky. Those are just a couple places off the top of my head that have people working on municipal broadband who saw the playlist, reached out to me. Usually what I do is I send people the script that I used at my city council meeting for them to take and use at theirs. Indianapolis, Indiana is another place. So, there's sort of a grassroots movement that's kind of blossomed out of this, but I want to make it more formal. I want to make it bigger. And, basically it just comes down to is, I need more resources to make this possible, but I'm doing the best I can along with Get Your News On with Ron to make this a cause that we really care about and try to do. Because, without a free and open internet, what else do we have a chance at solving? I mean, it's one of those things. This is our communication vehicle of our age. If we lose it, we're really up the creek without a paddle. So, I know the environment is collapsing. The climate is collapsing. The rich and poor gap is remnant of ancient Egypt in this country. People are dying without health care. There's so many things going on. Without a solid foundational communication vehicle, we cannot expect to start solving these issues because the corporate media, they're not going to help us. They don't care. A lot of our politicians aren't going to help us. Most of them do not have your interest at heart. Some of them do, but they're few and far between. And we need to get better people in office. We need to have grassroots movements on the ground. We need to have protests. We need to have general strikes. Without a free and open internet, executing all of that will be next to impossible in today's day and age.
Well, that cuts into speech, Ron. Ron, rather. It cuts into speech. People use the internet for free. It's like a freedom of speech tool. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's a way of speech, and them doing this is just cutting into our speech. But I'll leave it with this question. Not this question, but this last statement, and then I have 3 more questions left. We go to this country, call it the greatest country on earth, but we can't do anything. Medicare for all, can't do it.
Yeah.
Broadband, can't do it. Free college, can't do it. But we can send $780 billion to the military. I mean, you guys talk about this all the time. You do, Jimmy does, Jordan Sheridan, all these guys talk about. It's the same stuff, but The problem is, and I have this question for you, is as being a person that's, mainstream on YouTube, how do we get these older people to listen to the progressive agenda? I mean, we do have some older progressives, but not enough. How do you kind of gear or want to gear your viewership to more older voters? Because we need to educate them for Bernie to win. Bernie needs some of these Hillary voters to vote for him in the Democratic primary. He needs some of these older voters, older black voters in South Carolina, which they're voting for Joe Biden. Joe Biden's against net neutrality.
He
Joe
is,
Biden, yeah. I mean, the guy, they run all these frauds. Kamala Harris, where you're from, I mean, she's lost a lot of ground. She's pretty much a bow out, but
she's pretty much done, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to kind of get at all the points in your question, I don't know how much of it is an age. I mean, I would say that progressives in general our numbers need to go up. And that's across all ages. I mean, usually, yeah, when you see the polls, the, 18 to 35 bracket is like the biggest for Bernie. And I think that's pretty standard. But there's a lot of people of all ages who are, for Bernie or not for Bernie. And I think that progressives in general really, it's still a relatively small thing. It's growing. And, the way I look at it is, prior to 2016, I was just used to the fact that most candidates on the ballot don't really represent my point of view. A lot of the things I want to see in this country, I don't know if I'll ever see them. That sort of thing. And, I thought it was because I was so alone. And then what happened was Bernie came along and he kind of let us all know we're not as alone as we think we are. The other thing that, he let us know, not just him by himself, but another thing that was revealed to us in 2016, all of our worst suspicions about the Democratic Party were confirmed. And it was kind of eye-opening, kind of discouraging and encouraging at the same time. It was discouraging because you really found out, wow, this entity that I never really felt like I was a part of, which, I never really felt like I was part of the Democratic Party. I just knew that they weren't as bad as the Republicans. And I knew that it was a kind of better vehicle to get the country I wanted to see. Well, you found out that that entity is actually working against you, and they'd rather have a Republican in their tent than you. And I do believe that to be true. I think the Democratic establishment, they'd rather reach out to the right than reach out to their left. And there's a number of reasons for that, mainly because of money in politics. So it confirmed all of our worst suspicions. The encouraging part was it really let us know where the base was. And when I say that about the Democratic establishment, I mean the establishment. I mean the donor class. I mean the money train. I mean the people who are happy with the status quo. I'm referring to a Nancy Pelosi. I'm not referring to a Lee Carter or an AOC. So, there's more of us, so to speak, than there are of them. But there's still a lot of people who don't realize the status quo is as broken as it is. So, I think that messaging really needs to get out there, and we are outnumbered. We do not have the megaphone that MSNBC has, or that CNN has, or that Fox News has. But people are fleeing these things like the Titanic. The numbers for cable news plummets every single year. And independent media does grow. So, I think it's happening. Is it happening quick enough? Probably not. How do you make it quicker? Well, I think a strong, free, and open internet is essential to try to do that. And let's kind of start there.
Right. Well, look at what Anthony Rendon did in your state. I mean, single payer health care, they pass it in the Senate, it goes back to the House, they kill it. So, I mean, that's just one thing in California, what they did. But what do you think about Shank's shot at winning Katie Hill's seat in California? And do you know anything about that district? I know they said it was like more of a purple district, but do you think he has a shot at winning that?
I believe so. I'm not fluent in that district, but yeah, I kind of heard the same thing you did. It kind of leans a little more like moderate. It's that type of a district. And yeah, I mean, I think he has a fair shot. I mean, obviously he has a fair amount of name recognition.
Right.
I think that, Cenk's always been kind of a moderate by his own words, at least to my knowledge. And so, I think he'll kind of appeal to general voters there. So yeah, I think he has a shot. I haven't looked too much into it. I mean, I was when he announced, I was in Australia, so
Oh, okay. Yeah.
admittedly, I haven't had an ear to the ground. I'm just kind of catching back up on getting back into the country. So I don't know much about who his opponent will be or anything about that, anything like that. But yeah, I think he has a shot.
All right, so let me get back to these last three questions before we end the interview. With the Bernie campaign, what are your thoughts so far? The debate performances and what's going on as far as his campaign? I mean, we've seen in the debate he's taken a couple shots at Joe Biden, but they weren't really they didn't really land too hot of a punch. I mean, the debate after he had the heart attack, I feel like he did come back pretty strong. But then the debate that happened this past week, he didn't really do much. He uses that same Iraq attack, and it's the same attack. He should be hitting him on the bankruptcy bill, the crime bill. I mean, I just don't understand it. What do you think about the campaign so far?
Well, Bernie's always been, I mean, at least in as long as I've been paying attention to him, Bernie's always kind of been like, let's focus on the issues. He's not big on going after his opponents. I mean, he played, despite what her supporters will say, he played incredibly nice with Hillary Clinton. I mean, he really avoided all personal attacks. He kept it on the issues. And I think to some degree, a lot of people appreciate that. On the other side of it, he has to set himself apart. And you bring up Biden, and I'm with you on Biden, but I would also add he really needs to separate himself from Elizabeth Warren. Yeah, and he's got to take his gloves off a little bit to do that.
On the Medicare for All, she's flip-flopping like John Kerry. I mean, come on, man. I mean, you got to get at that. He didn't do anything.
He's got to get at that. And I get it. He's a diplomat. He's a nice guy, and that's fine. But, you can still call out policy flaws. Well, he did do that with Hillary. He played incredibly nice, but he still addressed some things. He's like, look, you make these speeches to Wall Street. You won't let us know what you said. I don't do that stuff. He said that. He didn't do personal attacks. He even said, I'm sick of your damn emails. I'm sick of hearing about it. But he did point out these policy differences. Well, he's got to do that again, because they're going to try to do everything they can to cheat him out of this primary.
And we need to win this, Ron. This is like, what they're doing with the rainforest, burning it down. I mean, we don't know how you talk about climate change earlier in the interview. I mean, we don't know how long the planet's got left. They say 12, it could be 8, 7, 6 years. I mean, and who knows if we even get anything done, if Bernie got in, if we did get some kind of Green New Deal, which, he's got the Democrats, the Republicans, all the special interests. I mean, it's going to be hard for him to get anything done, even with that movement, us, not him. So, I mean, he's got to start fighting. We need him in here. We can't afford anybody like Joe Biden. I mean, they're not going to do anything.
Well, Joe Biden wouldn't win anyway. But, yeah, he's got to take his gloves off a little bit, because he and that being said, I think he's done well in the debates. I think Tulsi's done well in the debates. And I'm hoping they eventually team up. That's kind of the ticket I'm hoping for. I think that's the best we could ask for. And I think that's the strongest foot forward to beating Trump, is a Gabbard, a Tulsi and Bernie as a ticket. But I think that, we live in an outsider time. That's how Trump won in the first place. People bought this lie that he was some outsider, which I guess in a way he was, but the only way he was an outsider was instead of being bought by the politicians, he was buying them. That's the only way Trump's an outsider. All right, that's it. Now he's just the guy being bought.
Well, Trump ran as a progressive, Ron, remember? He said all this stuff, healthcare for all.
I wouldn't say he ran as a progressive, but yeah, he did at one point say, why don't we just give Medicare for everyone? And he ran as a non-interventionist. He didn't deliver on that, but he ran as a non-interventionist. So yeah, I mean, he was running to the left of the Republican Party, which, I mean, it's pretty easy to be the left of the Republican Party. Every other right-wing party that has power pretty much in the world is to the left of the Republican Party. There's nothing like, I mean, Noam Chomsky calls the Republican Party one of the greatest threats to humankind. He's right. There's nothing like the Republican Party in basically any other Western democratic experiment. Why is that? Well, part of the reason that is because here there's not really an opposition to them. And both parties, we only have two of them, and both parties are bought by the same people. So, yeah, when someone like a Trump is running to the left of anything, it is disturbing beyond comprehension. But he did do that. As you said, he didn't deliver on it. It was all a bunch of lies. But people were so tired of the Washington status quo that they took a chance on this snake oil salesman. And so if a fake populist win in 2016, a real populist can win in 2020. That's why, it's going to take an outsider to beat him. And that outsider is Bernie Sanders. It's going to take a Bernie Sanders to beat him. The only two candidates that have, some of that outsider reach is Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard. They're the only two. Andrew Yang to an extent, but I think Andrew Yang, the best thing Andrew Yang could have done that really would have changed our country, he should have ran as a Republican. I wish he would have done that. I think Andrew Yang should have run it. He's a tech libertarian, so it would make sense for him to run as a Republican. It would still, make sense for his brand or whatever. He could have ran as a Republican. He would have been kind of like a Ron Paul in '08, except this is over a decade later. And, you have a bigger grassroots movement behind you. But anyway, so it's going to take an outsider to beat Trump is my point. And Elizabeth Warren is not that outsider. No. I don't think she'd beat him. Joe Biden, I think it's guaranteed. Joe Biden would lose worse than Hillary. It'd be brutal. Liz Warren would lose. She wouldn't lose as bad as Hillary, but she'd lose. Buttigieg would lose. I mean, it's just, you just go down the list of these just horrible candidates, but the establishment is throwing everything at the wall, hoping something sticks because they fear a Bernie Sanders presidency because he would upset the apple cart.
Well, I must say, oh, sorry, Ron, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if he does get in, he's going to have to govern like an FDR. He's going to have to kind of go to the people, be like, this is what I want to do. These are the people holding it up. What do we do? Let's act. That's how he's going to have to govern because he's going to have the House and Senate against him.
Right. I do agree with you with Tulsi Gabbard. You put her as VP. She's a total attack dog, and that's what Bernie needs. He needs this person that can go in there and be an attack dog because, like you said, he's not the best attack person as well, so he puts Tulsi Gabbard in there and she would kick butt as a VP. Well,
and I think that they balance each other out well. I mean, I have my disagreements with Tulsi Gabbard. Like, she's not for a jobs program. I think that's a mistake on her part. I like Bernie's healthcare plan better than hers. Right. But overall, I think foreign policy, she's a little stronger than Bernie, whereas domestic policy, Bernie's stronger than her. So I think that they really, and then like you said, she's more of an attack dog. He really isn't. I think they balance each other out very well. So I think they'd be a great ticket. And she has, the ability to appeal to a lot of different types of people as he does. They've both done that very well because they're not insiders, because they go against the grain in Washington. As a result, the Washington Beltway hates them. They hate they really stifle what they asked Tulsi Gabbard. And they would do just as much to Bernie Sanders if they could get away with it. Yeah. Because of how big he is now, they can't get away with as much with him. If they could, they would. With Tulsi Gabbard, they can still get away with more, so they do. But I think that's the only way we beat Trump, because you need somebody who excites people. You need somebody who's going to change some minds. You need somebody who's going to take away some of those Trump voters. Yeah, you need to get the Hillary voters, sure, but you need to get some of those Trump voters too. Yeah. Bernie Sanders can do that. Tulsi Gabbard can do that. Liz Warren, I don't think so. Especially when she's pulling these stunts like, I'm not going to go on Fox News. Well, that's just ridiculous. Look, you don't need to tell me how absurd Fox News is. I know how absurd Fox News is.
Bernie went on Fox News and they cheered
and got
for
a standing ovation. Exactly. Yep. Look, our media structure is absolutely toxic and disgusting. But if you're a politician, You have to go on it. That's just, you can't not go on these platforms. Who do you think you are? And by the way, the corporate media includes MSNBC and CNN. If you're going to entertain this fantasy that Fox News is the only toxic corporate media entity in our country, it's exactly that. It's a fantasy. MSNBC, every third commercial is for the oil and gas companies. It's for big pharma. So they pull the same stuff. They lie to you about Medicare for all. They lie to you about, speaking of net neutrality, you see Rhodes Scholars like Rachel Maddow pretend she doesn't understand what net neutrality is on MSNBC. You think she really doesn't understand it? No, I guarantee you she does. But her paycheck comes from Comcast, so she has to pretend not to understand it. So, that stunt by Elizabeth Warren was absolutely disconnected and stupid, and it just appeals to other people who live in her bubble that, oh, everything was hunky-dory until Trump got here. That's the complete opposite of what's going on. Things weren't hunky-dory, and that's why we got Trump. So, to win in 2020, you need a couple things. You need unlikely voters, people who are going to stay home, and you need undecided voters. Liz Warren would get neither of those. Joe Biden would get neither of those. Pete Buttigieg would get neither of those. Bernie Sanders will get those.
Well, look at Bernie Sanders when he went against Hillary in West Virginia. Bernie won 50 out of 50 counties in West Virginia. That's Trump country, baby. And he went in there and kicked butt. So, I mean, it is what it is. Last question I have is, you're in California right now. What are you seeing on the ground in California for Bernie? I know you've been traveling all over the country, and I guess we could do this for both. What are you seeing in California, and what are you seeing over the country? Because, Ron, you remember, and you were in California, I think, in 2016, when what they did with the California primary with Bernie, with the NPA voters. I don't know the whole terminology, but I know they screwed a lot of people out of voting in California. They were giving the poll people wrong directions about if they were NPA voters or whatever, Republican voters that wanted to vote Democrat or something to that effect. I mean, you can explain more about that, but I know they screwed Bernie out of a hell of a lot of votes in California last time. Well,
California, the rules are, and this is putting it very bluntly, but this is actually what the rules are. It's an open primary unless they decide otherwise. So it's really like, yeah, you don't have to be registered with the party to vote unless we decide otherwise. When can they decide otherwise? Any election they frickin' feel like. Literally, any elect, they can just say, oh, by the way, if you're not registered Democrat, you can't vote for a Democrat nominee, or you can't, if you're not registered. They can just do that whenever the hell they feel like it. That's what they can do in California, which is beyond corrupt, and they take advantage of that. I mean, you see people given provisional ballots. All of a sudden, they're told they can't vote in a certain place. The California Democratic Party, you brought up the single payer thing. When the nurses were protesting what they did to single payer, they were literally told, shut the F up. I'm censoring myself for the radio, but they were literally shut the F up and get out is what they were told. And I mean, if we wanted to talk for all the for instances of just utter corruption by the California Democratic Party, which we're told this is some blue utopia. Yep. And, I hate to break it to you. I mean, California is my home and I love living here. I really do. But there is no blue utopia in the United States. It does not. I'm sorry. It just does not exist. I've traveled to other countries, and we're a very conservative country. I mean, somebody said to me when I was going to Australia, they were like, hey, it's kind of conservative in Australia. Do you think you'll be okay there? And I looked at that person and I said, where do you think we live? I know you live in California and you might think it's a little bit more, but where do you think we live? You can't even show a nipple on television here yet. Right. I mean, where do you think we live? Are you asking me how I would go over in a country more conservative than the United States? I don't know the answer to that because I haven't toured in Yemen yet, which, by the way, it's interesting. Most of the countries actually more conservative than us we're dropping bombs on because I guess we need to be number one in everything. But, so it's absolutely, we live in a very conservative country, and I forget how I got off on this tangent, but it's one of those things like California is not this progressive utopia, and corruption takes place in our elections a lot. And I know you have similar problems in Florida. Y'all have been notorious for a long time now, and deservedly so. What happened to Tim Canova was insane. Documents of people filming people just transporting ballots in vans. We don't even know what their authority was, but they just got a bunch of voting ballots in some vans, and then they happened to burn a bunch of them when you wanted a recount. Gee, how convenient. It's we need more transparency in our elections. We need to have more accountability. We need to have paper ballots. We need to open up the primaries, and we need to make voting easier for people, not harder. So, there's a lot of work to be done. But yeah, Bernie, as far as getting back to your original question, there is a big groundswell for Bernie going on in California. He's here a lot, because they switched us over to March, so it's a much bigger battleground now. In the way we do our elections in general really needs to be. It's so ridiculous. I mean, our election season is so long. Baseball players are like, "What the hell's going on?" This is but the people are here. It's one of those things. The people are here. But will that transfer over to the ballot box? It's tough to say, because, it wasn't too long ago that we weren't able to get rent control here in California. Progressive utopia, we weren't able to get rent control. We weren't able to get the public banks. Now, thanks to a bill that was signed into law recently by Gavin Newsom, we are able to get public banks now. But we weren't able to pass it in Los Angeles, in the election. So, it's tough to predict what's going to happen when the ballots are settled. Especially when you have a bunch of corruption in play. But there is a big groundswell for Bernie Sanders here, absolutely.
All right, final thought. You just brought up Gavin Newsom. What is your take on Gavin so far? I mean, he came from San Francisco. He did have some issues with infidelity, but that's besides the point. He was supposed to be a progressive, but then I hear he's hanging around with the Clintons all the time. What is the story on Gavin Newsom? I mean, Jerry Brown was a progressive. He ran against Bill Clinton as a progressive, and then he came out for fracking.
Yeah. He was at one point in time he was, but then he kind of changed his tune.
Yeah, right.
Gavin, I mean, I'm not the biggest fan. I mean, I wasn't, he wasn't who I supported, and I voted for Delane Easton, but he signed a few things that made me happy. There were a few things that he's, the public banking things is like the biggest, for instance, I can think of off the top of my head. And there's been some other things where he's been solid. He's been solid on net neutrality. So he's done a few things that, were pleasant surprises. At least I would say so. But then he's done some disappointing things. There was some restrictions on plastic he didn't sign. He should have. He didn't. On climate change in general, he's been a bit of a disappointment. But yeah, so that's kind of my overall assessment. I don't, I'm not thrilled about him. But I do think that he at least, he's at least listening a little bit based on some of his actions he's taken. And I think we'll just kind of take it one case at a time with the guy. I mean, overall, am I a fan? No, I'm not a fan. But, hopefully he signs some good things. And he has. And hopefully that continues. And hopefully he, gets pushed on a couple other things. Because, the climate collapse is coming, as you said. So it's like, if Gavin Newsom can be pushed to do the right thing, hell, we've got to try.
Right. Well, the wildfires over where you are, we're getting hurricanes consistently down here, and there's drought down here, too.
They're over in Australia, too. I mean, Australia was on fire when we were over there, which, something I'll add to, you're asking about what do I see about Bernie over the country. I see stuff in the world. I mean, there were people in Australia who were just like, they were basically just like, Ron, please tell us there's a chance for Bernie Sanders. Wow. Like, the world is paying attention. And the world kind of sees it, at least the people that turn up at our shows, they kind of see it the same way, where they're just like, this is big. And a Bernie Sanders winning has an impact on the entire world. And a Bernie Sanders losing has a huge impact on the entire world. So the entire world is looking at us going, please elect Bernie Sanders, not please elect a Democrat. Because they know that incrementalism is not going to get us anywhere. They know that, if you have 4 years of an incrementalist, you're going to have 4 years of next to nothing happening, and then the Republicans' wet dream is going to win in 2024. So they're watching and they're saying, please, you need your FDR moment. Please elect Bernie Sanders.
Right. Well, I'll leave with this, and then I want you to tell everybody where they can find you again one more time. I'm a teacher, Ron, but I also work on the weekends over at a restaurant at a hotel chain. We'll just say that since we're online.
Well, isn't that American of you, having two jobs when being a teacher should be all you need? Isn't that George W. Bush would say that's American. That's great. We should celebrate that stuff. Except we shouldn't.
That's right. He did say that. But I got to tell you this. I talked to these 3 or 4 guys. They're big conservative Trump guys. And I told them, I said, you guys should watch Jimmy Dore. And they said, yeah. So these guys come, every time I come in on the weekends, they say, did you watch Jimmy Dore? What Jimmy said, what Ron said, what Steph said. And these guys are Trump voters. They will not vote for anybody else but Trump. They're going to vote for Trump again. But they watch all you guys on Jimmy's show. And I told one of the guys, I said, I'm interviewing Ron. He's like, I can't wait to see it. So you do have people in Florida that I personally work with that watch your show that are conservative, right-wing Trump supporters. So hopefully down the line, maybe you'll get to these people and their thick skulls. But, I highly doubt that. But I just wanted to let you know that these guys are watching you and they do enjoy and like the show.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think it's because, we kind of call out corruption where we see it. We call out corruption, via the Republicans, via the Democrats as well, and via the Washington status quo. And, I think there's definitely Trump supporters out there, and these might be, your friends that you're mentioning, that, they don't support Trump because they think he's some outstanding guy necessarily. They support Trump because they think he's an outsider, and they think he's going to kind of disrupt the apple cart and change the status quo. He's not going to. Look at who he surrounded himself with. So I would.
Steve Mnuchin, look what he did to all the people in California.
Absolutely.
I think Graham wasn't that the bank that, and you would know more about that,
yeah.
But
yeah,
with Mnuchin.
Yeah, Steve Mnuchin, he surrounded himself with the same kind of Wall Street insiders, similar to what Obama did. He surrounded himself with the same pro-war people. That's why he's not been the non-interventionist he said he was going to be. So take a chance on a Bernie Sanders. You took a chance on Trump. Take a chance on a Bernie Sanders.
And these guys are older guys. These guys, I'm only 28. These guys are like 60 years old. And they're telling me that they're watching you guys and they love it. And they just started and they said they're going to keep watching. So like I said, hopefully you'll get them.
That's cool.
So Ron, and thank you so much for spending time with me on the show. Can you just tell people where they can find you and where they can get those tour dates to check
Absolutely. You guys out? Follow me on Twitter at Ron Placone, youtube.com/Ron Placone. That's where I do get your news on with Ron, which is going to be starting shortly after we get off here. And tour dates, ronplacone.com. I will be coming to Florida. I'll be in Orlando March 12th. I'll be in Miami March 14th. That's Graham Elwood and myself. And I think we should be in Tampa March 13th. We're just finalizing the details there. But yeah, all my tour dates, ronplacone.com. Come out to a show. We will be touring a lot in 2020.
All right, great, Ron. Thanks so much for spending that time. I appreciate you.
All right, buddy. Cheers.
All right, bye. Thanks.